Welcome to Season 2 of Difference Talks, brought to you by the LeBeau Marketing, Communications, and Training Team. Our guests are inspiring people who share their stories of brand differentiation. Based on our book, The Power of Differentiation, our goal is to inspire 1 million people with the message that winning hearts and minds are the first step in growing market share. Now, on with the show.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Barry LeBeau. This is Marcus McMillan with me, and we have John Mullins with us today. And John is a professor and he is an author, and he's going to talk today, and it's all about differentiation, on how entrepreneurs break the rules, how they're a little different from other leaders and other executives. So, John, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And then we're going to dive into your 6 rules. John?
Cool. So, Barry, yeah, I finished an MBA at Stanford a long time ago, and I spent what turned out to be almost 20 years working in the retailing industry in the U.S. Worked for Gap, did a couple of startups. And in my mid 40s, I decided I wasn't learning very much anymore. I went back to school, got a PhD, taught for 7 years at the University of Denver, had a sabbatical at London Business School that I thought was going to be 10 weeks, and I've now been there for 25 years. So remarkable. Somebody asked me, how did you plan this career, John? I did plan? There was no plan to this career. It just, a door opens in front of you and you walk through that door and maybe you find something pretty interesting on the other side.
Our audience may not know this, but I want them to take a good look at your TED Talk that you did regarding your book and your concepts. Can you share a little bit about that? Because it's 2 million plus views already and climbing every minute.
Yeah, exactly. So TED is organized with a bunch of sort of subsidiaries that are called TEDx, and local institutions can create TEDx programs. And the students who run it at London Business School asked me if I would do a TED Talk when the book came out on the book. And I said, sure. So I did that. And the TED Talk on TEDx went quite well. So one day I got an email from TED and they said, would you mind if we moved your talk from the TEDx platform at LBS to the main stage at TED.com? Would I mind? Of course I wouldn't mind. And so we did that. And the numbers have just jumped through the stratosphere. So I think this idea of trying to understand what makes entrepreneurs tick and why it is that they are so successful when they're not all successful, but why some of them are so radically successful. I think that idea seems to have resonated with people.
So I know you're going to kind of run through your kind of 6, key rules, but I guess from your perspective, real quick, John, what is kind of that most damaging, not to take a negative approach, but what's one damaging rule that leaders kind of go in blindly and maybe they follow and they shouldn't. And maybe it isn't one that you've obviously got on your list, but it's something that you're like, hey, let's stop doing this. This is something that is, pulling you in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I think one of them is the first one in the book that I call Yes, We Can. So entrepreneurs, when they see something come their way that maybe is off the beaten path or not related to what they've done before, maybe they don't have the skills to do it, maybe they don't have the team to do it or the money to do it. They don't say, "Oh no, we can't do that," because they go, "Yeah, we can do that," and then they go back to their kitchen or their office and they say, "Holy shit, what did I just commit to? How the hell am I going to pull this off?" But in big companies today, they don't do that. We got taught many years ago that we're supposed to stick to our knitting and figure out what our core competencies are. You got to build them, nurture them, make them more robust. And if somebody says, could you do this other thing that's outside that set of core competencies, you're supposed to say no. There's way too much saying no in big companies these days. Not enough saying, yes, we can. So I think that's the biggest one.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Too difficult to take a right turn or a left turn? Why so many no's and not enough yeses for, I guess, larger companies, and the difference between the two?
Yeah. So the definition of entrepreneur is the person who pursues opportunity without regard to the resources they have under their control. Well, people who do that don't gravitate to work in big companies. The
Mm,
people who gravitate toward big companies, some of them are more concerned about, how many people work for them and where's their office and, how much autonomy do I have, and lots of other things like that. That's part of it. Another part of it is most big companies have armies of lawyers whose job is to make sure the top executives stay out of jail. Uh, and so it's really hard to get stuff through the system. There's something I describe as the concrete middle, where ideas from headquarters can't flow really down to the
mm,
coal face, but conversely and more importantly, ideas from the coal face just don't flow upward through the
mm.
organization and get a fair hearing and get a chance to move forward. So that we could have a whole hour talk, on that your question alone. But I think there are a lot of reasons. But 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 the outcome is that big companies say no to most new stuff, and entrepreneurs look for ways to say yes.
Uh, I can speak from experience. I was running a tiny little company, and one of my clients came to me and said, "Hey, I want you to take over. We'll sell you our marketing department, and you can do all of our marketing." And initially, I said no, and I gave them the name of a lot of other agencies that could go do it. And the client kept coming back to me, and finally, I said, "Why do you keep coming back to me?" And the client said, "Because we trust you." So in that moment, without regard to how in the world I could do it, I said, "Okay, we'll do it. I'll take on all of your marketing. We'll buy your marketing department. We'll be your marketing agency." And he said, "Great. Meet with me on Monday." I got off the phone, and like you said, I went, "Oh my gosh, what did I just do?" And I think one thing I'd like maybe you to give me some feedback on this. I then pursued this, John, and I thought, okay. And I came in and I'm looking at all the projects they had internally at the department and all this kind of stuff. Fast forward only a month from that time frame, everything I expected that I was going to deal with was completely upside down. Everything I was dealing with, the number of projects, everything I thought I was going to walk into was different. And it turned out to be very successful in a completely different way than I had planned.
Mhm.
Does that
Yeah.
sound familiar to what you've studied with your entrepreneurs?
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, Peter Drucker, one of the perhaps the most notable management thinker in the 20th century, he's gone now, um, said, if there's a new venture that is successful, what you typically find is it is successful selling what it sells to somebody other than those to whom they expected to sell it, selling a different product than they expected to sell, and selling it for different uses than they expected it to be used for. So I think your experience is right on the pattern. You don't know what's on the other side of that door you're going to walk through. But if you never walk through those doors, then then you're going to miss opportunities, and entrepreneurs don't like to miss opportunities.
John, again, those kind of six different rules. I mean, how can a leader kind of establish those rules without burning down their company, right? And removing everything. What's a way to kind of
Hmm.
weave them into what they're doing, putting them into practice? And again, we're talking entrepreneurs. How can they do that without completely changing everything?
Well, let's talk about what they are, because I think if we bring to
Sure.
life what they are, then the answer becomes clear. So we've talked about yes, we can, but 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 the next one maybe to talk about, or the next two to talk about, are two that I call problem first, not product first logic.
Hmm.
So good entrepreneurs don't think about what am I going to make. They think about what kind of problem that a customer has can I solve, and then together with that they think very narrowly about their target customers. So in a big company, you can't really get to do anything new unless it's going to move the needle, right? The big
Right.
company just doesn't want to mess around with something really small. But entrepreneurs think about problems of very, very small target markets. And that gets them started. And then once they meet the needs of that target market, they've learned some things. And maybe the things they've learned how to do lead to other things. And the great example of this is the foundation of Nike many, many years ago. Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman, the founders of Nike, were runner and track coach respectively. And they didn't think the running shoes that were being offered for sale at the time were suitable for elite distance runners like Knight was. See, Knight could run almost a 4-minute mile. Track shoes in those days were made for sprinters, and sprinters run around tracks to train. Nice smooth surface, uh, but not distance runners, right? Distance runners run on country paths, dirt roads, and they're always stepping on rocks and stones, and they might step in a rodent hole. So they get a lot of sprained ankles, and they get a lot of shin sprints because they run miles and miles and miles, many more miles than a sprinter runs. So they said we need a better shoe. Well, um, they thought about it, and Bowerman was kind of a tinkerer, and they said, well, we need a shoe with a wider footbed to protect against those sprained ankles, and we need a shoe with a little more cushioning in it to protect against the shin splints. And by the way, wouldn't it be nice if the shoe were lighter in weight? Because if you have just a slightly lighter shoe times all the paces in a marathon race, that's going to be a significant load relieved from the runner and hence better race times. Well, long story short, we know what happened with Nike. They started selling running shoes to elite distance runners. It took 5 years before Phil Knight could quit his day job. But once people started winning gold medals at the Olympics with Nike shoes, guess who else wanted to wear Nike shoes, right? Everybody did. But once they had done all of that, they learned how to import shoes from Asia. They learned how to design shoes with athletes' input. They'd learned how to get athletes to endorse their shoes. And it was then a fairly simple, straightforward step to say, well, let's call John McEnroe and see if we can do tennis. And then let's call Michael Jordan and let's see if we can do basketball. And of course, we know what Nike is today. But the foundation of that were these two rules that big companies have. Big companies think about the product. So think about Coca-Cola. There was Coke, then there was New Coke. That didn't work out too well. Then there's Diet Coke. Now there's Coke Zero. All these Cokes, Coke, and Coke. Where's the innovation here, guys? They're thinking about the product, not the customer's problem. And they're thinking about huge target markets, not these little tiny target markets like elite distance runners that then might take you somewhere else. So that's two of them that kind of come together in the Nike story. So we've talked about three. The fourth one I like to talk about, I call ask for the cash and ride the float. And the poster child for this is Elon Musk. So Tesla had a management team in place, but hadn't built any cars yet. And they approached Musk, who had made a bunch of money at PayPal, and they wanted some investment. So Musk said, "I'm going to come in. I'll give you some money, but let's see if we can sell some cars." They hadn't made any cars, by the way, but let's see if we can sell some cars. They did a little roadshow in California, and in 3 weeks they sold 100 Tesla Roadsters, none of which had been built yet, for $100,000 each in cash on the barrelhead tonight. Well, do the math. That's $10 million now in the bank from customers, right? Ask the customer for the cash. That's $10 million in the bank. Now we can go afford to do the engineering, buy the parts and so on, to build those Roadsters. Well, if you fast forward to when the Model 3 was launched, they did this same thing with all the models. But when the Model 3 was launched, it was going to be the first Tesla that was closer to being a mass market car. Well, they announced the Tesla Model 3. Guess how many deposits they got of $1,000 each? They got almost 500,000 deposits of $1,000 each. Do that math. That's $500 million US dollars in the bank before they built the first Model 3. So this notion, in a big company, you'd never do that, because in big companies, there's money around. There's lots of retained earnings. There's a lot of cash in the bank. And if you need some cash, you have to ask the capital committee and so on. But there's cash there, and you can get it. And then in the big company, you say, okay, what's the investment going to be? So you figure out how much investment there's going to be. What are the future cash flows from that investment? And are those cash flows worth the investment we're going to make today? So this is all this financial analysis. Entrepreneurs don't do that. They say, well, if I can get the customer to give me the cash, I'm going to go build the roadsters,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll see where the story goes. All right. Fundamentally different behavior.
And it all goes back to the entrepreneur having confidence in herself or himself to
Yeah.
do it. Because if you don't have the confidence, you're not going to go ask for that $100,000 or that $1,000 because you're going, oh crap, I'm not sure we can pull this off, and I don't know. Now, when we get back from break, we're going to finish the next couple rules. Plus, I want you to share, if you can, how the leader today at a larger corporation can learn from these rules to be even better. So
Yep.
we'll be back on Difference Talks with John Mullins.
Difference Talks is a LaBeouf production. Our focus is differentiation, and we believe it's more important than ever to differentiate your brand and experience. Contact us at LaBeouf.com for a conversation. We'd love to connect with you.
Welcome back, everybody. We are with John Mullins, author, TED Talks star, by the way, professor, and he's talking about 6 rules. We've covered 4 of them regarding how entrepreneurs are differentiated from the standard executives that are running larger companies. And it's fascinating. We're going to cover those 2 other rules that we have not covered as well. Marcus, would you like to lead us through here with John?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say, John, continue on those last 2. And, I think what our listeners are looking for as they run departments and they're running large companies, what can they glean from and pull out of your 6, tips and rules that is going to inspire them as they work with their teams and lead their teams? What can they use for their everyday? But keep on continuing.
Exactly. So the 5th one is what I call beg, borrow, but don't steal. So the basic idea is that in big companies, you invest up front when there's something new to do, but entrepreneurs don't want to do that because entrepreneurs are, the myth says they're all risk takers. They're not really risk takers. They're good risk managers, and they know what the prior odds are for most entrepreneurial ventures. They're going to fail. So why would you want to invest your own money up front into something that's going to fail? Well, they don't. So what they do is they borrow the assets they need. So there's a great company in the UK called Go Ape that runs a whole bunch of treetop adventure courses. But when they got started, they had to figure out where we're going to get some trees. Well, they found that the Forestry Commission in the UK owns a lot of woodland, and they have parking lots and bathrooms and all that kind of stuff, and they wanted higher visitor counts. They went to the Forestry Commission and said, here's what we'd like to do. We'd like to put our kit on your trees. Could we do that, please? Uh, well, they made a deal, and they got an exclusive for 25 years to have only Go Ape do this with the Forestry Commission. So they built a wonderful business, but they built it by borrowing the trees, borrowing the parking lots, the whole shebang. So again, in big companies, that's not the way it's done. It's how much do I own, and how big's my turf, and what are the assets, and what's the head count that I manage. That thinking isn't going to get you there. And then the last one, entrepreneurs never ask permission, right? So many areas of our economy today are regulated in one way or another, and that was the case in San Francisco when Uber set out to build a taxi business that didn't own any taxis. Imagine that, right? So had Uber reached out to the commission in San Francisco and said, could we please build a taxi company and get a license? We're not going to actually own any taxis. I think we all know what the answer would have been, right? Well, there's no way you can do that. But Uber said, well, we're just going to start because the laws had not contemplated what you could do digitally today that you couldn't do before. And you get started, and then when the rule makers get upset, well, then you beg forgiveness. But by the way, you have a whole lot of really happy customers who are on your side at that point. So those are the six. They're not my rules. They are six mindsets that break these well established rules that big companies have been taught they should live by. So, what do
Mm-hmm.
you do if you're a leader in a big company today? Maybe you're the CEO, or maybe you're just running the innovation unit, or maybe you're running a department in operations or sales or wherever. What can you do to break some of these constraints or rules that you've been taught big companies are supposed to live by? Well, I think you can look at these examples. You can read Break the Rules. That's
Mm-hmm.
one thing you can do. The second thing you can do is you can look at these examples and say, well, we don't have to focus only on products that can move the needle. We can try some experiments that are going to start out small, for example, but maybe if one of them works, that one has the potential to grow. And there's a great story of Nespresso that was started inside the big coffee company, Nestle, the biggest coffee company in the world. Nobody wanted to do it, but they figured out how to get it started. Today, it's the fastest growing part of Nestle's coffee business,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody said, no, you can't do that. So I think as a leader, it's helpful to get cognizant of these principles or rules, as I call them, that are holding you back, and ask yourself, okay, how can I do something differently here?
Now, one thing, as you've gone through these rules today, they come from a lot of research that you've done over the years. Was there a big surprise for you where you thought, "Oh, this surprised me. This isn't what I really expected"? I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, I think the surprise, Barry, had come actually a long time earlier. So when I finished my retailing career and became a professor, one of the things I did is I read a lot of the research that had been done in entrepreneurship, which is the field in which I was interested. And there had been a whole bunch of studies done back in the 80s to try and figure out the answer to this question: what's the difference between entrepreneurs and other successful business people? And all of that research found nothing. That we can't find any differences. For every entrepreneur who's an extrovert, there's another one who's an introvert, like Michael Dell. For every PhD rocket science entrepreneur, there's a Turkish immigrant, like the guy who built Chobani yogurt into the biggest yogurt business in the U.S. today. So they couldn't find any differences, and yet in my work now with entrepreneurs over the last 25 years, I know there are differences. And I couldn't believe this. You ask about surprise. This research didn't find them, and I said, well, maybe I can find them. So what if I sit down and think about all the case studies? I've written case studies on more than 50 companies in my career. Could I look at the research I've done on those companies and see if I could find what the differences are? And that difference turned out to be their mindsets, and hence the book on these six mindsets. But I didn't know what they were when I sat down to try and answer that question. Now I know.
Another word for mindset is the psychographic, because it's so easy to look at the demographic and say, okay, like
Mm,
you said, they're this age, or they have this much wealth, or they live in this part of the country, or they have this education. You're talking about the psychographic, the mindset of
it's
the
up here.
individual, right?
It's up here. Yeah,
It
Mm-hmm.
that's right.
is.
Yeah.
Now, as you coach CEOs and CFOs at larger companies, because I know you coach and you talk with these people, what are you telling them? Because they could really experience even more success
Sure they could. Yeah. Yeah.
following this. How does that work for you, and what do you share with them?
I, I I tell them, take off the shackles. You don't need to be bound by these rules, sticking to your knitting and only focusing on the product you sell. I mean, for example, Tide. When we're in the U.S., the detergent we use is Tide, and Donna and I get a really big chuckle every once in a while. They change the formula in Tide, and they'll take the blue speckles out and they'll put green speckles in, and they'll call it new improved. Exciting, right? Isn't this wonderful? Well, come on, guys. That's just tweaking the product. It's not thinking about customers at all. So take these rules away. Don't just focus on your product. Think about your customer and what their problems are. Think about a very narrow group of customers, not some huge group. It's not like if I could sell a Coke to every 1% of the kids in China, I'd be rich. No, 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 no. Think about a tiny target market that's got a problem that you think you can solve. Don't worry about asking to invest. Don't go to your corporate treasurer and say, I need money for some newfangled new idea in a small target market with a problem that you guys are going to say is too small. Just go ask the customer for some cash and let the customer fund your new idea within a big company. And then when you have a bunch of customers and you have a bunch of revenue, then you go to the corporate coffers and you say, well, look what we've got. We did this little skunk works here off on the side nobody knows about. And look how fast it's growing. Now, would you like to invest in this so we can help grow it faster? I mean, that's the kind of behavior that I think we can get people to engage in.
We worked with a really great entrepreneurial client at Audi of America decades ago, and he came to our company to share an issue. He said, look, he said, nobody at the Audi stores, at the Audi dealerships at the time, he said, nobody was really selling the Audis. They were selling other cars at the dealerships. So they were selling Oldsmobile, sounds hard to believe today, but Jeep and Porsche and other things. And so nobody was selling Audis. And he said, I've got an idea. And he said, why don't we have one person at a store be called an Audi brand specialist? And he said, because we'd have at least one person who cares, and we could lavish that person with attention and see if he or she could sell. So what we did is we used our entrepreneurial approach, and we said, okay, your boss will not go along with this. Your boss will say you're insane. Why don't we pilot the program? Let's go pick 25 stores and go out and have one person per store, and we'll try. And if it's a disaster,
who cares?
We'll shut it down.
Yeah.
And so we did that. And Greg's a great entrepreneurial mind. And he said, okay, let's do it. So we go out, and we thought it'd be 6 months. Within 2 months, sales from those dealerships that had one person, see, this sounds counterintuitive. They had only one person that was an Audi brand specialist. Those sales at the stores were up 25%. The rest of the Audi stores were down 11%. And he said, okay, let's launch it. And we did. Today, now this is a funny part of the story, every Audi salesperson at every Audi store is an Audi brand specialist. So in a way, there's no specialization anymore. But the program grew because one person, this gentleman, said, okay, let's pilot. Let's think small.
Give it a try.
Right. And we worked with each individual brand specialist in the beginning to learn what they wanted and needed.
Yeah. 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 It's not rocket science, Barry. It's not rocket science. It's understanding your customer, trying to figure out what they want, and delivering that in ways that the competition isn't doing. And that can be done in every big company if you take some of the shackles off and get rolling. Yeah.
So one thing, John, we like to ask to kind of end our discussion a little bit is best day. And what is that best day for you? What does it look like? And again, it's at the end of the day, you're thrilled. You've done something really special. You've kind of motivated maybe students or an entrepreneurial team, or you've given a great speech. What does that day look like for you, John?
Oh, that's an easy question for me to answer. At heart, I'm a teacher, and that's why I came to this second career, and it's what I love to do. 2 weeks ago, I was in a classroom at Atlanta Business School with 74 entrepreneurs from an organization called EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. And I taught a session on a case study about an Argentine winemaking business that had been through the most up and down set of challenges one could imagine. And I came home after that session that day. I said, boy, that was just magic. These people were engaged. They were arguing about what should they do next, what shouldn't they do next, and building the kind of camaraderie in the classroom where people, I'm not talking at them, I'm raising questions and they're debating them. Should we go north? Should we go south? They disagree, and they learn from each other, and maybe they learn a little bit from me, and I learn a lot from them. That's my ideal day, and that was a really special one.
Well, today we've learned 6 rules. Will you run them down for all of us here one more time?
Again, Barry, yes, we can. Problem first, not product first logic. Think narrow, not broad about your target markets. Ask for the cash up front and then ride the float to pay for whatever else you need to do. Beg, borrow, but don't steal the assets you need. And lastly, never ask permission, ask forgiveness later.
Love it.
John, this is great. I really hope our audience embraces this like Marcus and I have, because it's a wonderful message for entrepreneurs because it's reinforcement. It's exciting. And for those really great leaders at large companies, it could be an insight into a big breakthrough. How could people learn a little more about you, learn about the book? Where do they go?
Well, they could read the TED Talk. That's an 18-minute version of the book. They can pick up the book at Amazon. It's called Break the Rules. There's a website for the book. There's a website for me. All the usual places, Barry. I'm pretty easy to find.
Well, we thank you today. I love the thing you said, entrepreneurs are not risk takers. We're risk managers. And that's really what we are. Because a risk taker, to me, you're out gambling, you're going crazy. I don't want to do that. I think what you said today is inspiring. You have the 6 rules and they apply to so many of us. So Marcus and I thank you for joining us on Difference Talks. Until next time, everybody, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Difference Talks. All of us at LeBeau are proud to celebrate great people with inspiring messages. Difference Talks was created, produced, engineered, and performed by the LeBeau team. Even the music is original. Contact us at lebeau.com to learn how to differentiate your brand and give your team a sense of significance and meaning.